All right, let's get right into it. We all handle money every single day, right? But what about money substitutes? I'm talking about things like the cash in your money market fund, or even some of those digital stable coins. They're all over the place. And at the end of the day, they're really just debt, basically an IOU that somehow gets treated just like real money, trading at face value. So, how in the world does a simple promise to pay become as trustworthy as a dollar bill? Well, that's a big mystery we're going to solve today.
And that brings us to this really fundamental question. Can just anyone create money? Well, the short answer is kinda. See, anyone can create debt. I can scribble on a napkin promising to pay you $1,000. Easy. But the hard part, the real trick, is getting other people to accept that napkin as if it's worth the full $1,000.
The economist Hyman Minsky just hit the nail on the head with this quote. It perfectly captures the entire issue. It's not about making the debt, it's about getting everyone else to accept it as money. So, what does it take to earn that kind of universal trust? Well, it turns out it all comes down to overcoming two huge fears, two major risks that any piece of debt has to conquer before it can be treated like real money. You can think of these as the two unbreakable rules of financial trust. So when you boil it all down, these two risks are about two really simple questions. First up, you've got counterparty risk. This is that gut feeling, that basic fear of, hey, is the person who owes me this money actually going to be able to pay me back? And then there's the second one, interest rate risk. This one's a little trickier. It's the fear that, okay, maybe they can pay you back, but the stuff they used to pay you has dropped in value. So really, the two questions are, will I get paid? And, just as important, will what I get paid with be worth the same? Okay, let's tackle that first fear, counterparty risk. The solution is something we can call a safety cushion. Now, the fancy term for this is over-collateralization, but all it really means is making sure there's a big enough buffer to soak up any potential losses. Let's look at a super simple balance sheet to see exactly how this works. Imagine a company has $1,000 in assets, stuff it owns, and it has $450 in liabilities. That's what it owes to others. The difference between those two, $550, is its net worth. And that net worth is the magic number. It's the company's own skin in the game, and it acts as the first line of defense for the people it owes money to. See, the creditors get paid first from the assets. The owners only get whatever's left. So that 550, that's your safety cushion. It means the company's assets could lose $550 in value before the creditors would be at any risk of not getting their money back. It's the exact same reason we trust a big, well-capitalized bank. And it's why a stablecoin has to prove it has more than enough real assets backing every single coin. The bigger that cushion, the more you trust it. It's that simple. So that safety cushion handles the first question, will I get paid back? But that's only half the story. There's that second, sneakier risk that has everything to do with when you get paid and what your assets are worth at that exact moment. And that brings us right to our second big problem, interest rate risk, or let's just call it the risk of time. So here's the core issue. Imagine you have a debt that's due really soon, like tomorrow, but your main asset is something that takes a long time to sell without taking a massive loss. This is what's known as a duration mismatch, and this is where things can get really dangerous, really fast. To really feel how risky this is, picture this. You owe a ton of money, and it's due tomorrow, but your only real asset is your house. Now, what happens if, out of the blue, interest rates spike? The value of your house is probably going to drop. And because you have to pay that debt now, you're forced to sell your house into a falling market, probably for way less than it was worth. You might not even get enough to cover what you owe. So what's the fix for this nightmare scenario? Well, the solution is actually beautifully simple, at least in principle. You have to back your short-term debts with assets that are also short-term. You need assets whose value doesn't get tossed around by those sudden swings in interest rates. Assets with a very, very low duration. Okay, so that's the obvious next question, right? What kind of assets actually have this amazing quality? What kind of stuff is basically immune to interest rate risk? What is the ultimate backing for a trustworthy short-term debt? Turns out, they mostly fall into three buckets. First, and this is the most obvious one, is just plain old cash. A dollar today is worth a dollar tomorrow. Second, and this is where it gets really interesting for the economy, is liquid consumer goods that have really stable, wide demand. Think about things people are always buying, no matter what. And finally, you have short-term receivables, that's money you're expecting to get very soon, but, and this is key, only if they are backed by either cash or those same liquid goods.
And the one thing that connects all of these assets, the real secret sauce, is this. Their value doesn't really care if interest rates go up or down. They're resilient. They are the bedrock, the stable foundation you need to build a money substitute that people can actually genuinely trust. So we've basically put all the pieces of the puzzle together. You need a big safety cushion, and you need to back your short-term IOUs with short-term, stable assets. What's so cool is that this whole idea, it's not new at all. In fact, it has a classic, old-school name. So here it is. This is the formula we've been working towards. You take debt that is over-collateralized, way more assets than liabilities, and you back it with those low-duration assets. And what do you get? A trusted money substitute. You get debt that trades at par, just like money. And that whole recipe has a name, the doctrine of real bills. It's an old theory from classical economics, and it basically says that the best way to create safe, reliable money substitutes is to make sure they're backed by real-world, short-term commercial activity. Think about stuff like goods being shipped from a factory to a store. It's the theory that explains the practice we just laid out. Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. We just walked through a financial doctrine that's centuries old. But in our world today, with crypto, stablecoins, and all sorts of complex digital finance, does this fundamental idea of backing debt with real, stable, short-term stuff still hold the key to building trust? That's a question that's more relevant now than ever.